Welcome to this webinar. We are quite happy to start our series of technical webinars, TFO Canada technical webinars. My name is Marisabel Gonzalez. I'm the program director at TFO Canada, the Trade Facilitation Office Canada. And today our webinar is on, of course, trade diversification Canada as an alternative export market. Trade diversification is a fashion concept nowadays. So I think we thought we could start our series of webinar with this interesting topic. For that, I'd like to give you a few instructions to take into account during the webinar. So please just keep your microphone mute and click the speaker icon at the bottom of your screen so you can hear the presentation. If you have any issues, Fatima Sara is here with me. She's the project manager for Trade Support Services. And you can send her a private chat if you have any issues during the webinar. There will be a short survey, only 5 quick questions that we will launch before the end of the webinar. So grateful if you can answer them. Your feedback is important for us to improve our webinars. Also, I want to tell you there is translation. So you just need to go to the icon at the bottom of the screen that say more. And if you prefer to listen to the webinar in French, just click French. And now I'd like to introduce our guest speaker, Christian Sivier. Christian is a TFO Canada associate since 2016, almost 8 years anniversary, Christian.
Yes.
So following a 30-year career in international logistics, Christian Sivier started a Montreal-based import-export consultancy in 2010 called Solimpex, which is active in 2 areas: consulting to help SMEs grow internationally and training on the logistics, customs, and regulation aspects of international trade, free trade agreements, supply chain management, and related issues. Christian also lectures for the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Associations in Toronto, gives seminars and webinars for various trade organizations like the Montreal Chamber of Commerce, the Toronto Region Board of Trade, Invest Ottawa, Supply Chain Canada, and similar and personalized training for importers and exporters. He also publishes articles in Supply Professional. He will be our presenter today. Please keep your questions for the end of the presentation. But if you have any immediate question during the presentation in any particular slide, please just put your question in the chat. Fatima is vigilant of the chat so she can tell Christian when the question appears in the chat. So no further comments. Thank you very much for coming. And Christian, I pass you the microphone to start the webinar.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marisabel. Merci beaucoup. Muchas gracias. Good day, everyone. And bonjour. I'm really happy to be with you. Buenos dias or buenas tardes, depending on what time of the day you are. Welcome to this session. We're going to talk about Canada as a trading nation, as an alternative market, or as a diversification market. And this is, as you know, TFO's mission is to help overseas companies in selected countries to do business in Canada. So we're going to talk today. We're going to talk about a little bit of we'll share some technical aspects with you as well. I hope they'll be interesting. And it's because, we don't want to just give you a high level presentation about all the potential. We also want to give you actual practical information. And so, as Marisabel said, if you have specific questions, perhaps keep them to the end. However, if you have a question on what is presented on the screen, if what is presented on the screen or what I say is not comprehensible or needs to be clarified, then please intervene at that time so we can clarify the side and the information we are presenting to you on these slides. And so again, I'm really happy to be with you. Thanks to technology, we're all together, even though I believe you're all in different parts of the world. So that's very nice. I hope that every one of you also lives in a peaceful country. And so to set the stage, what we wanted to start with is mentioning, reminding us, even though we don't actually need to be reminded, but because we see it every day, times have changed to a certain extent. We were all, the whole world was affected by the pandemic. Remember, everyone remembers about the pandemic. Nobody in the world um, was not aware of the pandemic. And I guess in the same way, we could say that the fact that the US has a new president since January 20th, 2025, it's a bit like the pandemic, in a way. Everybody in the world has heard about that, about that person. And so if you might have seen a few months ago at Davos, our prime minister made a remarkable speech where he took note of the fact that times had changed, but and that Canada was ready to partner with middle powers, with all countries that are willing to do that, and to still navigate through and develop business and trade and prosperity, even though times are changing. And so uh, United Nations rules, international rules, the World Trade Organization rules are being challenged. However, Canada is a strong believer in these rules, and Canada is very much a rules-based country, um, and so that's what I think. One of the things also our prime minister wanted us to reinforce in those days. And so another word I said, everybody has heard the word pandemic. I also said everybody has heard the word of the name of the new president, the new U.S. president. Probably also everybody has heard the word tariff, um, and which for some is the most beautiful word in the dictionary, which I think is not shared by so many people. Um, and so what's kind of interesting is a bit anecdotal, but I wanted to share that with you. Tariff actually comes from Arabic, so there's people in the US who are a little bit anti immigration or anti foreign countries. So maybe they'd be amused to see, or not amused to see, that the word that they use a lot, tariff, actually comes from elsewhere, um, and from a different culture. And so we hear a lot about tariffs, and the correct term, the correct word to use in trade is customs duties, or in the UK, in British English, we say customs dues. But in Canada and in many countries around the world, we say customs duties, or we sometimes say import duty. So just to say that this word tariff that we hear a lot is actually not the correct term. And everyone saw that the U.S. Supreme Court has invalidated many of these tariffs or customs duties that had been introduced by the U.S. president. It was ruled that these were not were imposed without authorization from Congress, which is how it's supposed to happen. Some headlines were less nice. Some headlines referred to the fact that these tariffs were illegal. So depending on which way you look at it, so we know there's a lot of um, potentially some confusion, also some hardship created by these. And so Canada is not in that category. Canada is your ally. It's an open trading nation. We respect and follow international rules. We are a rule of law country. Um, and Canada is an ideal destination for you for your trade diversification efforts. And what's interesting from also to compare the situation with our neighbor to the south. You know that the U.S. is next to us, right, south of us. You know that Canada and the U.S. are about the same size. In fact, Canada is a bit bigger, but the U.S. economy is much bigger. Um, than the Canadian economy because we have a smaller population. However, what's interesting is that, and so because the US is a much bigger population, it relies a lot on its internal market. So it does not rely that much on international trade, or not as much as we do. Whereas in Canada, as you see, 65% of our GDP comes from trading in goods and services, which is quite remarkable, quite high. Um, and so another indirect way to say that Canada is a great market to approach for you, in diversifying your export markets. And so to show you who our main suppliers are here in Canada when we import products from overseas, the US is our first supplier, um, followed by China and Mexico. However, if you put together the European Union countries and the UK, so if you put them together, then actually it's at par with China. So Europe is the second supplier of Canada after the United States. More or less equal with China. That's if we take Europe as a whole. So it's just for information. It's just to share that with you. It also illustrates the fact that Canada does a lot of international trade in both directions, east and west. Now, for those of you who are either exporters or you're trade specialists and you want to help exporters do business and export to Canada and develop their markets, I wanted to share with you a couple of sources of information that are interesting, that are freely accessible, and that might be useful to you. So here on this slide, I wanted to show you um, where our main imports come from in Canada, and where to find that information, actually, to find out more about Canada's imports and exports. You can go on this website of the Government of Canada, the International Trade Stats. So it will give you all that information, the trading in goods and in services, um, both import and export, as well as by countries and by products. So it's quite an interesting database, and it's maintained by Statistics Canada. So I wanted to show that to you, share that with you in case you want to look into it and get some information as to which products Canada imports, which products Canada exports, etc., etc. It's a great source of information when when you want to get a feeling for the market you're going to approach. So to get a feeling for the Canadian market is a very good tool. Another one that's interesting that is maintained by another government agency is a Canadian Importers Database. So it's called CID. And so there, what's interesting is that we'll even give you the name of the main importers by product. So you see, you get a feeling for the categories. So animal products, vegetable products, oils. So when you click on these products, then it will bring you to the import statistics, and it will give you the largest importers that are importing these products in Canada. I think it goes to the first 10 or 20 or 25. I don't remember exactly. You can also do a search. If you see in the middle, you can also do a search putting a product name or putting an HS code, the first 6 digits of the HS code. So either way, it's a great way again to get a feeling for um, what the Canadian market imports, what we import from where, and who does it, which companies are active in that importing business in Canada. And of course, as you probably know, and if not, I'll reinforce this with this slide. You know that TFO has a great database of importers that are registered on our website. So the great advantage of that is that It gives you a good source of information as to who could be potential customers for you, depending on your products. But it's neat in a sense that this is not a a public database that comes from statistics, statistical information. It's a voluntary database where the importers who are there, they made a voluntary decision. They made the choice. They wanted to be on the TFO database. So in a way, it's also even more interesting, because this is not just statistics. This is people who are interested to potentially um, purchase your products. Now, very briefly, I just wanted to say, because of course, we're going to be very positive. We think Canada is a great market for diversification, but we want to be realistic. We want to be upfront. And so, very briefly, I just wanted to say that for some products, it's not that simple. The distribution of these products is um, not as open, because in the case of wines and spirits, these are provincial monopolies that handle the distribution of these products in Canada. So if any of you are in wine, spirits, and similar products, then you have to um, look into each province, each Canadian province. The Société des Alcools du Québec in Quebec is the sole distributor for these products in the province of Quebec. The Liquor Control Board of Ontario is the sole distributor in the province of Ontario. So there, for these products, it's a little different, because you have to approach each province, each provincial board. And then I also wanted to point out, we also wanted to point out that if you are exporting any or plan to export any dairy, poultry, or egg products, these are limited by quotas. And that's because the Canadian government has this policy of limiting the importation of dairy, poultry, and egg products to protect its home industry, to protect the Canadian industry. So this is called the Canada Supply Management System. So, and this is beyond. This does not, TFO does not get involved in any of these products, because they're very special and they have different channels. And so we just wanted to point that out to you, just so that you know, if you're in any of these categories, you need to do a bit of research, and it's not as easy as for other products. So we could call them barriers if you want. So as I said, it's just to be upfront with you so that you know about this. We want to give you the real practical information. And so one of the things that has changed, and so as I said earlier, some of this information is a bit technical, but we think it's important to know about these technical details, because, well, we need to deal with them at some point or another. And sometimes there's so many abbreviations that are used that it's hard to perhaps recognize them. So, in the context of importing in Canada, first of all, I wanted to say that the customs agency is called the Canadian Border Services Agency, CBSA, so they fulfill the customs function. And a couple of years ago, they introduced a new tool, a new portal, which is compulsory for importers, for all Canadian importers. So if any of you hear about the CBSA, you'll know it's the Canada Border Services Agency. It's the government agency that fulfills the customs function, which means that anything that comes into Canada has to be cleared by CBSA, Canada Customs Agency. And so within that, there's a new portal that's called CARM, CRM. And so if you hear about it, just know that it's a relatively new tool that has been put together by CBSA, and that makes it compulsory for importers to create an account with them. So all Canadian importers today, and that's been introduced a few years ago, is still relatively new. They need to be registered with the CPSA. They need to post a security bond. It's like having an account with CBSA, with the um, Canadian Customs Agency. So it's just for information. This is, of course, an issue for importers, not directly for you as exporters, but we'll see in a moment that sometimes it could be affecting you. And as I said, we wanted to share some of the technical information so that to make you aware of it and better prepared to deal with them, because sometimes some of these abbreviations are mysterious and we get lost. So CARM, a new portal for importers, is compulsory. Anybody who wants to bring goods into Canada has to be registered with the CARM portal, has to have an account with CBSA. And as I said a moment ago, our customs agency is not called Customs. It used to be called Customs a few years ago. It used to be called the Canada Customs and Revenue Agency. And then it changed name. This agency was split in two. And the Canadian government created an agency called the Canada Revenue Agency to deal with taxes, and then the Canada Border Services Agency to deal with customs issues. And all the information about customs is publicly available on the CBSA website. You see they have, I wanted to take a screenshot to show you what it looks like if you want to navigate Canadian customs rules for importing products into Canada or for exporting products to Canada. That's what it looks like on the CBSA website. And what I also wanted to share with you, and again, it's I know it's a bit technical, but we thought it was useful to show you what it looks like if you want to export goods in Canada and you want to know what is the landed cost going to be, right? So that you see if your product is going to be competitive. And so what do we need to do to figure out the landed cost of our products? We need to have the shipping cost, but we also have to have the customs cost, like customs duties or tariff, as it's wrongly called. So with the customs duties in Canada is to be found very easily on the CBSA website. Just type in customs tariff 2026 and it will show you. It will open the customs tariff by chapter, as you see here at the bottom, and then you will see the applicable duty rate for your product. And this is all organized by HS code. And so you see, it looks like this if you open the Canada Customs Tariff in Chapter 21, which I took at random because it's a good way to illustrate it. Everybody can relate to food. So in the customs tariff, you have 99 chapters. So if you're in the food preparation business, you see you'd find your product in Chapter 21. And so on the left-hand side, these are the HS codes of products. In the center, you have the description. And then on the right-hand column, you have the MFN rates, which are, if you remember, if you're familiar with MFN, that stands for Most Favored Nation. And so if you're selling mustard in Canada, the rate of duty is going to be 9.5%. If you're exporting mayonnaise or salad dressing, it's going to be 11%. If you're bringing mixed condiments or seasoning, it's going to be 8%. So you see, it is all detailed. It's very detailed. But that's how it is. When we do importing and exporting, we need to pay attention to details. And so this is where you'd find, to arrive at your landed cost, you go and look for the applicable duty rate in the CBSA customs tariff based on your HS code. And then MFN rates means it's a rate that applies to everybody, to every country, that does not have an exception. And so on the right-hand column, the last column on the right, these are where the preferential rates are mentioned. It's usually 0% or free. And here you see all kinds of abbreviations. What they refer to, these abbreviations on the right-hand side, they either refer to free trade agreements or to developing countries. So what it means is if you're bringing mustard from a country that does not have a preferential tariff, your import duty is 9.5%. If you're importing mustard in Canada from a country with which Canada has a free trade agreement, or from a country that's considered a developing country, then it's free, it's 0%. And so these are a bit mysterious as well. Excuse me, all these abbreviations. And I'll show you what they refer to in terms of Canada's free trade agreements in just a moment. So first, excuse me, I wanted to zero in on the famous HS code. For some of you, this might be a bit mysterious. So when we do importing or exporting, when we do international trade, we have to know something about the HS code, excuse me, of our product. And so just for information, the HS code is a 10-digit number that is organized by the World Customs Organization in Brussels. The first 6 digits are international. They're the same in every country. The last 4 digits can vary from country to country. There's 99 chapters. I don't want to bore you with this. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but just make you a little bit familiar with it for those of you who are not. It's an international numbering system of products that we need for customs compliance and that we need to know about, for customs compliance, for free trade agreements, and to calculate the duty rate of our product in the importing country. And so, as I was saying earlier, you remember there's 2 columns in the customs tariff. One that's called the MFN that has relatively high rate, 8%, 9%, 11%. Many products have small percentages. Automobile parts are 6%, for example. The highest tariffs or the highest duties in Canada are for garments, for textiles, for apparel, is between 15 and 18%. For footwear, it's about 20% in most cases. And so that's the rate of duty. And then the column on the right-hand side, as I was saying earlier, it refers to exceptions. So if your country is in one of these exceptions, then you would get duty-free entry in Canada when you export your products to the Canadian market. So I know it's detailed, it's technical, but we need to take that step to see, how successful are we going to be. It's going to be based on the cost of entry, the landed cost. So that's what we need to do to establish that. So very briefly, I wanted to share with you the fact that, yes, Canada has many free trade agreements, I think with about 51 countries in all. So we have the Canada, United States, Mexico agreement, which replaced the NAFTA agreement from 1994. So it was updated in 2020. That's for Canada, United States, Mexico. We have a free trade agreement with the European Union, the 27 countries of the European Union, which to which the UK has been added. When the UK left the EU, then we made a separate agreement with them. And then we have the Trans-Pacific Partnership, which links Canada to 10 or 11 other Pacific countries, including Japan, Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Vietnam, etc. And then on the right-hand side, you have the individual free trade agreements that Canada has, with all these countries that you see here on the slide. There's one that is being so these are the ones that are in effect today. There's in Canada's trade diversification efforts, we have negotiations with several countries, with the ASEAN group of countries, with Mercosur, with India. So these are in the pipeline, shall we say. One that has been signed, but that is not yet into effect, and that's because it needs to be ratified by Parliament, and it's being done actually this spring, and that's the one with Indonesia. So just for your information, there is an agreement between Canada and Indonesia, which has been signed last September, but it's not yet in effect because it has to be ratified by Parliament. That's why I don't show it on the slide here, but this one is coming up very soon. And so the other thing, so I mentioned that for free trade agreement countries, the rate of duty is mostly 0%, right? It says free. And so I also said that developing countries benefit from duty-free entry as well. And so some of you might be asking yourself, well, how do I know if my country is considered an emerging country or not? And so for that, you have to look up elsewhere on the CBSA website. You have to look for something called the list of countries and applicable tariff treatments. And you will see that all countries benefit from MFN, the most favored nation tariff, which is the highest one. Actually, it's a misnomer. That's the World Trade Organization rules. And then you'll see the next two columns. GPT stands for General Preferential Tariff. LDCT stands for Least Developed Country Tariff. So again, I apologize for bombarding you with these acronyms, these abbreviations, these technical terms, but I feel it's important to recognize them and know what they mean so that you can, go through all this and figure out what is applicable to me. And so if the country you're exporting from into Canada is on the list of GPT or LDCT countries, then you would get duty-free entry in Canada. And what you would need to present to customs, to CBSA, is a Form A certificate of origin that you see on the right-hand side as an example to show you what it looks like. So remember, I'm showing you the customs tariffs page again, hoping that with the explanations we went through previously, it gives you a better understanding. So on the left side, HS code, in the center, description. On the right-hand side, MFN rate. It's the rate that applies to everybody that does not have an exception. And then on the right-hand side, the exceptions or preferential rates, free trade agreements, like there's one with the Caribbean countries, and then LDCT, least developed country tariff, UST, United States tariff. So these either developing countries or specific countries that have with which Canada has a free trade agreement, as we saw, on the previous slide. And so, how do we calculate our duties and taxes payable in Canada? So again, this is a bit technical, but I want this to be useful, and I hope it will be. And so, just know that in Canada, when we declare the value of goods at customs for assessment of duties, if there is any, we deduct the cost of shipping and insurance. This is a bit original because in many countries, it's the opposite. In many countries, when you import products, you go with the landed price and you declare to the local customs the price of the product and the shipping and the insurance cost. It's what we call the landed price. In Canada, it's the opposite. We deduct shipping and insurance costs from the invoice, from the value we're going to declare to customs, and then we calculate the percentage of duty, as we saw, which will be 9% or 5% or 18%, depending on the product, or 0% if you have a free trade agreement, or if your country is considered a developing country or an emerging country. And so that's then you calculate then the duties applicable, if there's any, and then there's the GST, the goods and services tax. It's like a value-added tax. So that's all importers in Canada have to pay the GST, the 5% GST. And if the product pays customs duties, then the amount of the customs duties is added to the product value, and the GST is calculated on the total. So we actually pay GST on the product price and on the customs duties as well. So that's what the Canadian importer pays, 5% GST. And in Canada, we have provincial taxes as well, but we don't pay provincial taxes on B2B standard imports. We only pay provincial taxes on e-commerce shipments. So just so that you know. So we have a very low duty-free allowance for if any of you are in e-commerce. The duty-free allowance is very low. It's only $20. So, which means that as soon as your sale exceeds $20, then the Canadian customer importer will have to pay duties, if any, as well as GST, as well as provincial taxes. So you see, on traditional B2B imports, we only pay the federal tax, the GST of 5%, whereas on B2C e-commerce transactions, the Canadian customer pays the GST and the provincial tax. So this is, I know, technical, but it's for information also, and I think it's useful to know when you arrive at your landed price. And so, one thing I wanted to share with you, and I said that the Canadian importer pays duties based on the HS code and what the product is, and based on the tariff treatment. Do we have a free trade agreement with Canada? Are we are we considered a developing country? Then the product comes in duty free. But we always pay GST, that everybody pays GST. It's 5%. However, what I wanted to point out is that it's possible to be a non-resident importer in Canada. What you need to do is to register for GST. So that is may not apply to everyone, or may not be very practical, or may not be the solution for you, but just know that this possibility exists in Canada. And so that is tied to something called the Incoterms, which I would presume all of you are familiar with to a certain extent. The international Incoterms are international rules that define the responsibilities of the seller and the buyer when it comes to delivering merchandise. So in effect, it defines the transfer of costs between seller and buyer, as well as the transfer of risks. And so in effect, what an Incoterm says is what is included in your price and what is not included. So what's included in your price is paid on your side. What's not included is paid by the Canadian importer, the Canadian customer. So there's 11 Incoterms. I won't bore you with them because that's not the objective today either. But very briefly, I just want to give you just a little bit of guidance, shall we say, or insight into that. So if you are want to sell your products to a Canadian customer, and or you have a potential Canadian customer, and you don't want to have any shipping costs or any shipping responsibilities, you want your customer to pick up the goods from you and make the shipping arrangements, then the term to use would be FCA. That's the first one on the top left hand side. In the middle, the other option I wanted to share with you is if you want to make things easy for your potential Canadian customer, maybe you want to include shipping and insurance in your price, because then it makes it a lot easier for the Canadian customer to make comparisons and to say, okay, yes, I'm interested in that product, I want to buy it. So if you go that route, which is making things easier for your potential customer, then you would use a CIP Incoterm, because it means that you will have included the shipping and insurance costs to the Canadian point or airport or of entry in your price. And then the last one, the third one, is if you want to make things very easy for your Canadian customer, your potential Canadian customer, and sell DDP. And then, so to sell DDP is demanding, because then you become a non-resident importer. So it's not the objective of today's session, but I just wanted to share these with you to give you some some potentially some ideas and on how to do things, on how to approach your customer from a pricing point of view. Now, we said that the customs function in Canada is fulfilled by an agency that is not called customs anymore. It's called the Canada Border Services Agency, CBSA. But depending on the type of product we want to bring into Canada, then other government agencies will be involved. If you're bringing food products or plant products, they have to be screened or checked or released by the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, the CFIA. If you are bringing in medical equipment or vitamins or even cosmetics, they are administered by Health Canada. And so, and Transport Canada would screen transportation material, vehicles, but or tires or things like this, or motors. And then Global Affairs has quite a wide mandate to handle import permits. So we have import permits in Canada for some products, and that's administered by Global Affairs. It's not administered by the CBSA. And so depending on what you're going to bring into Canada or sell in Canada, the Canadian importer will do a declaration to the CBSA and will also have to do a declaration to one of these agencies. And that is done through a joint portal. And most of the time, of course, it's a customs broker who is going to do that. A Canadian customs broker will look after that. And but it's just to give you the a feeling for the lay of the land and for what information is required by who. And so the Canadian Food Inspection Agency, for example, issues licenses to food importers. That was introduced a few years ago. You see, 2020, the CBSA, sorry, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency requires what they call an SFC license for all importers in Canada, from all importers in Canada. So and also for some products, for some meat and fish products, seafood, the foreign establishment has to be registered with the with the CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency. So just keep in mind, if you're into food products, at some point or another, you have to verify the information and the requirements from the CFIA, Canadian Food Inspection Agency, and your customer, the Canadian importer, will need an SFC license. Now, if you're selling DDP, as we touched on earlier, it is possible for a foreign company, for a non-resident importer, to get an SFC license in Canada. It's a bit demanding, but it's possible. And so one tool that's several tools I want to share with you, because food is a big market, um, and but it's also demanding in terms of regulations. And so two things I wanted to share with you. First of all, a database that the CFIA maintains, called the AIRS database, Automated Import Reference System. So what does that do? Or what does it give you? Well, what it will give you is if you're planning to import a specific food product in Canada and you ask yourself, what are the regulations for that product? Then this is where you'd find it. You type the name of the product, and then it will ask you, it will maybe refine it to make sure it's the same product we're talking about, and then you'll say from which country you want to bring it in, and then it will say that's the documentation you need. You need a phytosanitary certificate, or you need a health certificate, or you need an inspection certificate. So it's a very neat tool to find out precisely what are the requirements of the CFIA where, relevant to your particular food item, because they will vary depending on the food product. So the AIRS database is a very nice tool to have at our disposal. Another tool that the CFIA has is a food labeling, excuse me, a food labeling tool, because, well, labeling regulations, as you know, sometimes a challenge when we export. To figure out what are the labeling requirements of the country we want to sell to. So food labels have to have certain information in a specific order, um, and for ingredients, but also for allergens, and this and that. So this is where you'd find that on the CFIA website if you want to see precisely what information is required on my food label. Very briefly, I wanted to touch on intellectual property, because we know today it's an important part of international trade. We know, thanks to e-commerce, we know there's a lot of fake goods, contraband or counterfeit goods that are traded, and so we know, of course, it's not allowed if you're shipping or selling or buying any products that have a brand, that have a logo, then it has to be legitimate product. Otherwise, it's against the law. So part of that falls under intellectual property rules, intellectual property laws. So make sure that, yes, what you plan to export to Canada, if it has trademarks, logos, etc., make sure they're genuine and they're not fake products. And if you don't own the brand or the logo, make sure you have the authorization from the brand owner to use it. So very briefly on that. Import controls. Actually, I mentioned earlier, there is import controls in Canada for some sensitive goods, for technology. There's also sanctions against certain countries. Um, and so it's again very detailed. It's based on the country, but also based on the product. And so where to find that information? Global Affairs. Global Affairs have a very nice, very practical website that has all the information. You see, it has, if you go into import control and import permits, uh, it will give you precisely the breakdown of which products might require an import permit in Canada. I know it's going to be the importer's responsibility, but I think it's also good for you to find out, perhaps in advance, on your own, what are going to be the barriers to entry, or what are going to be the requirements. And so, as I said, technology, uh, military, of course, but also sometimes there's some import controls or import permit requirements for textiles, because specific agreements. So this is where you'd find the information on the Global Affairs website. It's quite easy to navigate through it. I mean, generally speaking, what I wanted to share with you is the fact that obviously depending on the product you're going to export to Canada, you have to find out about the Canadian labeling requirements. We saw where to look for it for foodstuffs, but also you have to be familiar with Canadian standards, and rules and regulations for products. And you have to have the country of origin on your documentation and sometimes also on your product. If you're packaging goods for retail, from your country, then your labeling has to be bilingual, French, English. There's specific rules for textiles, for the labeling of textiles, not just garments, but also, um, bedding supplies. For some electricals, there's the CSA standard, there's the UL standard. This is something we need to check into, of course, ahead of time to make sure if these apply to us, that we make sure that we comply with them. And also, because that's going to be checked at the port of entry, at the port or airport of entry. And also, as I said, if our goods or if our product is labeled for retail, then the labeling has to be bilingual, French, English. Where to find information on Canadian standards for products, it will be in the Standards Council of Canada. They're based in Ottawa. And this is where we'd find out, the information. I said the specific standards. I talked about the CSA standard, the UL standard for electronics or some footwear or some toys, etc., etc. That would be the place to find out about it on the Standards Council of Canada website. Documentation for customers. You probably already know this, but I wanted to reinforce it. The essential document for customers is the invoice, the commercial invoice, because the invoice is going to identify what it is that you're selling, who you are as an exporter, who is the importer. It will identify the product description, the HS code, the value, the amounts, the quantities, the terms of reference, the terms of payment, the shipping terms, the Incoterm. All this is on the invoice. And so the invoice is really the essential document for customs purposes to make sure our products are not held up at customs. And then, as a second step, the certificate of origin is important. As we saw earlier, uh, if you're part of a free trade agreement, or if you get the preferential tariff treatment because your country is on the list of countries that benefit from preferential treatment. Remember the acronyms: GPT, General Preferential Tariff; LDCT, Least Developed Country Tariff. I know this is all technical, but so that's what would give you duty-free entry in Canada, but you'd need to supply a certificate of origin, as we saw on the previous slide, and so some of the previous slides. So I just wanted to reinforce this um, for as an essential element of success. Of course, we have to make sure our documentation is issued properly, is complete, is correct, and fulfills the requirements. Very briefly, if you are exporting products in Canada that contain any wood packaging material, crates, pallets, etc. You're probably aware of this already if you already do exports. But if you're a new exporter, maybe you don't know about this. So that's why I wanted to talk about it very briefly. Canada follows the IPPC convention, and so any wood product material that comes into Canada, pallets, crates, etc., needs to be we need to use or you need to use treated wood that has been treated as per the ISPM 15 regulations, and there needs to be a mark on the wood, on the packaging. So just to reinforce that in case some of you are new to exporting and maybe are not aware of that. When this was introduced several years ago, I think it was around 2007, 2008, then for several years, CBSA allowed non-compliant material to still enter Canada. What they did is they treated the wood in Canada, at the point of entry, and now they no longer allow that. So when we have wood packaging material arriving in Canada, then CBSA just sends the order back to the origin country, the box, the pallet, or the container. Who can help us with freight, logistic, customs issues? I want to point you to the Canadian Professional Association of Logistics Companies. So that would include shipping companies, freight forwarders, as well as customs brokers. You'd find that on the Canadian International Freight Forwarders Association website, the CIFA website. They have a members directory, and then you can do a sort by province, by city. This is where you'd find, Canadian partners to help you navigate with these issues. Um, Selecting the right point of entry indeed is essential because, as you know, Canada is a huge country. It's a very vast country. We're as big as the United States. In fact, we're a bit bigger. We just won't say out loud just in case they get upset at us. But we're bigger, but we have a much smaller population, and so we go from the Atlantic to the Pacific and to the north as well. And so, what I wanted to illustrate with this map here is show you the red line. The red line is what we call the Trans-Canada Highway, is the highway, the national highway that goes across Canada from east to west. And so you see the Canadian population is located along the U.S. border simply because that's where most of industry is and consumers and infrastructure. So just keep that in mind that Canada is a vast country that where the density of population is relatively low, and so therefore because of that, it's important to select your right point of entry. Especially when you begin, and so one of the element of success, if you want, is to first look at what we call the Quebec to Windsor corridor, which you see at the bottom. So the Quebec to Windsor corridor is that part of Canada in eastern central Canada that goes from Quebec City to the east, all the way down to Windsor to the west. And Windsor is just across from Detroit. And so in between Quebec and Windsor, you have Montreal, you have Toronto, Hamilton, etc. And so this is where the Canadian population is most dense, and also where the part of Canada where you find the most infrastructure for transportation infrastructure, industry. So therefore, it's probably a good thing to approach that part of the Canadian market first, because this is where distribution will be relatively simple, easy, and cost effective. As you spread into other parts of Canada, like Manitoba, or in the west, you'd have Alberta, BC. Then, of course, there could be slightly different distribution issues, and so you have to select your point of entry and where you start. I think the right way, depending on where your market is going to be. If your market is mainly in Western Canada, which could happen, then of course Vancouver would be a good point of entry. But um, normally the Quebec Windsor corridor is kind of your preferred entry point. So as long as you're within that, this is where you'd be um, most successful to be able to deliver to consumers, in a cost-effective way. And I'm almost done with my presentation. And so what I wanted to share with you is, so here we're going to talk more about the food industry because the food industry is important. And also the Canadian market is a good market because, Canadians are interested, are open. They like to try new products. They like exotic products. So it's quite a neat market. And so what I want to share with you is the main trade shows that happen in Canada in the food sector. So on the left-hand side, you have the Cial Canada, which is, I would say, the biggest one in Canada. Cial, you may be familiar with the Cial from the French Cial in Paris. That happens every 2 years in Paris. So the people who run the Cial in Paris have started the Cial Canada about 15 years ago, I would say. And so the Cial Canada is the biggest trade show in Canada for food products. There's exhibitors from all over the world, and it alternates between Montreal and Toronto. So last year it was in Toronto, and this year it's in Montreal. and it's always around the same time. Here, April 29 to May 1st. And then next year, it will be in Toronto. So this alternates. On the right-hand side, the CPMA, that is a great trade show as well, that is focused on produce, fruits, and vegetables. So it's slightly different. It's kind of more specialized. And that one, it rotates. So it rotates every 4 years. So 1 year is in Toronto, 1 year is in Vancouver, 1 year is in Montreal, 1 year is in Calgary. It travels every year. So the next one is in Toronto at the same time as the Cial, actually, in Montreal. And then at the bottom, the CHFA stands for health food. So it's a health food association. So if you're more into organic products, for example, then there's two trade shows that are quite that are specialized in that, run by the CHFA. And so one is in Vancouver every spring. So the 2026 Vancouver, I think, has already happened. Um, and and there's one in Toronto every fall. So this year in Toronto is going to be in September, and then Vancouver next spring in 2027. I wanted to show you also some trade shows happening in Vancouver, because some of you may be a little bit afraid of the cold in Canada. You know, you heard about cold and snow and this and that. So Montreal, Toronto, yes, winters are quite extreme or severe. But you know, in Vancouver, the weather is great all year round. They get hardly any snow. So maybe you're more inclined to start with Vancouver in your, you know, your exploration journey to Canada. So all this to say that yes, to test the market, to get a better feeling for a market, it's great to visit a trade show. It's not necessarily wise to exhibit at a trade show the first year, you know, right? Because exhibiting is demanding. It's also costly. So one way to do it is to visit the trade show the first year, and then see perhaps you want to exhibit the following year. And so here we wanted to show you the food ones, but there's also interesting trade shows in fashion, for example. There's a Montreal fashion show every year, the Toronto fashion show. There's the gift shows. There's also, yeah, there's all kind of, you know, trade shows that could be interesting for you to potentially visit or eventually exhibit at um, as you go along. And then to end my presentation, I just want to share very briefly just a couple of slides on the fact that yes, um, Canada does a lot of business with the US. We are like you. We're trying to diversify our exports and our sources of supply to so we don't rely as much on the US. But just to give you also a snapshot of the current situation, because we know there's a lot of information going around about tariffs and this and that. This changes quite often. So today, there's a free trade agreement between Canada and the US and Mexico. And so most goods from Canada and from Mexico get duty-free entry in the US as long as they comply with the rules of origin. There's some exceptions that you see here on the screen. So we just wanted to give you a picture of what's going on today. This is of course outside of the TFO mandate. TFO's mandate is to develop your ability and your success and provide and support your success in Canada. But we are part of the global world, and we have the US as our closest neighbor, and so we just wanted to give you a little refresher on how things stand between Canada and the US, just for your information. So there's a free trade agreement that applies between Canada, the US, and Mexico that has some exceptions. And the also, yes, to remind you that yes, the US is our neighbor, and so therefore, for those of you who are new to exporting, you know, keep in mind that um, you know, Canada is a great market to explore and to enter and to develop. But you know, at some point, once you're well established in Canada, it's relatively easy also to look at the U.S. market. So, as I said, this is outside of the TFO mandate, but we just wanted to share that with you, just to, you know, for clarity, shall we say, and also to show you um, the indirect potential of the Canadian market. that brings me to the end of what I had prepared for you. I hope it was not too much or not too heavy or no, not too detailed oriented. As I said earlier, I think it's important to know some of these details, also to recognize some of the acronyms, the abbreviations, and what are they for? What is their purpose? And so I thank you all very much for your attention. And now I'd like to open the floor for questions, of course. So it's time for a Q&A.
Kristen, can I ask, like, is it okay to launch the poll right now before the question?
And I forgot about this. Thank you, Fatima, for
Oh,
reminding me.
sorry.
I need to take a step back. And I forgot to tell you that to help you achieve great success in Canada, we have prepared a little poll for you, which we wanted you to participate in and answer. It will give us, a better feeling for, who you are and what your challenges are. So Fatima is going to launch the poll. I don't know, Fatima, if I need to stop sharing or not.
No, I think it's okay. I launched it now. Can you see it?
Okay. So if yeah, so please take the time before we go into the Q&A. Please take the time to answer this poll. It's very important for us to get to know you better and get to know your challenges better and your situation better. So in turn, we can help you better.
Yeah, so it's basically 4 questions,
Yes.
like 3 closed questions. So basically, you just need to choose. At the end, you would submit. The last one you can write and let us know what is the most valuable thing you've learned from this webinar. But yeah, so I'm gonna give everyone like some time to go through it.
Yes,
I
absolutely.
had collected a few questions from participants. I can after that like start with these ones, and
Absolutely.
please feel
Absolutely. So
free.
let's Yep.
Yeah.
Let's give ourselves a few minutes to answer the survey, and thank you all very much in advance for filling out and the survey. It's very important to us. So please go ahead, and then when you're done, then we can move to the Q&A.
Yeah. So we wait at least to have 50% with participants response, like then we can move forward if that's okay with you, Christian.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes. So where are we in percentage now?
11.
All right. Well, we have to start somewhere. So 11 is better than 10 or than 5. And so
Okay.
please go ahead. Please take the time to fill out the short survey. It's really helpful to us. We'd be very grateful if you would fill it out. And also, as you do that, you can think of questions you may want to ask.
Yeah, I'm
Be
getting more
really happy.
questions here.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I put them in your chat box, but I can also
Currently, I don't have visibility of the chat box. I have to stop
okay.
sharing.
Yeah, I can. What are the questions?
And how are we doing on the survey, percentage-wise?
Oh, 32%.
All right. Okay. We're one third done. So if you
Yeah.
make a little effort for us, that would take us to 50%. Is 50% going to be the tipping point?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I hope
Okay, let's
more,
aim
but
for 50%.
okay,
Let's be um, adventurous and ambitious. Let's aim for 51% at least.
right.
Yes, and if you want, while we do that, if you want to let me know about a question, for example, then we can perhaps that will give more time to the other participants who haven't filled out the survey yet.
So the first question I have is from Virginia Lucy. She said, kindly clarify who needs to register to the CBSA CARM. Please, should it be importer or exporter?
Okay, so Virginia, yeah, thank you for asking. So it's the Canadian importer that needs to be registered with CARM. It's clearly the Canadian importer's responsibility and obligation. So perhaps why I made it a bit confusing unnecessarily is that I said that sometimes if an exporter sells DDP and becomes a non-resident importer, then the exporter then can apply for CARM. But these are special cases if you sell DDP. But otherwise, yes, it's the Canadian importer that has to be registered with CARM. Absolutely. It's compulsory.
Next one is from Fausto Escobar. So his question is like, what about the rawhide wrapped with chicken is a snack for pets? I think was at the beginning of your presentation where we were talking about specific products. So he asked about
Yes.
that.
Yes. So Fausto, so the thing is that yes, so products that are pure dairy products, like cheese or ice cream or poultry, i.e. meat, for example, then yes, there's restrictions for them. Now, if you just have snacks that contain some dairy or some poultry, then that's probably okay, but it needs to be validated. It needs to be verified. It depends on the percentage of poultry or dairy.
I hope it's clear, Fausto Escobar. The next question was from Paula Bernard. Do you know when the FTA between Canada and Ecuador is going to enter in place?
No, and I don't know. I think it's mostly negotiated, but it has to be ratified by Parliament. And so probably later this year, but I think Parliament currently has the Indonesia agreement to ratify, and also the UK's accession to the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I think Ecuador is a second step. But it should still be, this year, hopefully by the summer.
I'm going back to another question from Fausto Escobar. So he said it's dihydrate Kristen, and also what is that ad volarium for his 230910? Can you explain?
Maybe it's the HS code, yes.
Oh, okay.
It's probably the HS code. And so that's the thing is that so we have to check based on the HS code. You have to see if it's if it's covered by the poultry regulations or not. Same with dairy products. It's going to be based on the HS code. Yeah. So we need to do a little research specifically for your product to see if it falls or not under the poultry regulations.
A question from Camila Guzman. She said, I don't know if I missed it, but is there any resource or webpage to find where she can find new customers within Canada, for example, in the food industry?
Well, you would have some on the TFO website, right? We have a list of Canadian importers. And if you're looking specifically for Canadian food importers, then there's a database, there's a Canadian importers database that is accessible that will have a list of importers, the largest importers by product. So that would be, yes, it's called the Canadian Importers Database, CID. So both TFO has information, importers that have voluntarily registered with TFO, which means they are interested, in new products. And then you have the Canadian Importers Database that would have information as well. And then, of course, one way to get a feeling for the food market, Camilla, is to, we talk about trade shows. For example, the Cial trade show that's going to happen in Montreal, that was in Toronto last year. I believe that the list of exhibitors is public, and so at these trade shows, there's a lot of overseas exhibitors. There's a lot of European, Asian, Latin American exhibitors, but there's also Canadian exhibitors, Canadian food companies. And so that could also be a neat way to find out a little bit more about the Canadian food market by looking up the list of exhibitors at the Cial trade show or the CPMA trade show as well. So that could be an interesting source, I think, Camilla.
Okay. Another question from Arlene. He's asking, what is the best channel to find trusted distributors and retailers interested in importing our products? So it's eco bags from Mozambique.
Bags?
Yeah, eco bags from Mozambique.
Okay, well, that's very specific. So what industries are they used in? Are they used in food, for example, or are they used in because I guess one way would be to look for information on those industries, like food packaging or um, food retailers, because they would be likely to use bags, right? Eco bags. So I think we do have to look a little bit elsewhere. We do have to look for retailers, perhaps, or food processors, Canadian food processors. So again, on the CIAL website, list of exhibitors would be interesting, and I guess you could look up food processors associations in Canada. So I think these would often be provincial. Like there's an Ontario Food Processors Association. There's also a Quebec Food Processors Association. So these may be provincial, but that could be a good source of information as well. And usually these trade associations, they have their list of members is public.
Okay. Another question from Surendra. What is the requirement for dog shoe, like from Nepal? I know this is like another answer, but
Sorry, what product is it?
dog shoe.
Shoes?
I don't know. No,
Yes.
dog. I don't know. So Surendra, can you just specify or explain what is the product?
Yes, if you would please clarify that.
Yeah. I'll move to the next one from Kaushik Patel. If I want to import ghee and cheese from India, what are the procedures and which department I contact?
Tea?
No, ghee and cheese from India.
Cheese. Okay.
Ghee and cheese.
That would be the regulation, the applicable regulations. You'd find that on the AIRS database of the CFIA, the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. That's where you'd look for it.
Okay, this question, so Brian, he's asking, can products eligible for the Canadian market be re-exported to Mexico in addition to the USA?
Yes, that's right. If you export your product to Canada because it's your primary market, from Canada you can re-export it to the US because it's very close. You can re-export it to Mexico as well. The only thing is that for your product to come in, so your product might come into Canada duty free because maybe there's a free trade agreement or your country is considered a developing country. But then when it's exported to the US, or to Mexico, then the US or Mexican customs rules would apply. But from a logistics point of view, yes, it's very easy to do. Now, if you want your product to benefit from the free trade agreement between Canada, the US, and Mexico, then it has to be processed in Canada. So it's a different story.
Just like hello, Christian. So just
Yes.
clarification from Arlene. So she's regarding the eco bags. So she said, or he said, it's made from fabric for everyday use, grocery shopping, laptop bags, and gift bags.
Okay.
So it's not for food packaging.
Okay.
So yeah.
Yes, so it's wide. So you have to look at which industries could be potentially interested, and then look for potential customers in each of these industries. So it could be then a bit more, a bit of a bigger search. And if they're made of fabric, then I guess we also have to validate that there's no import permit requirements on that for that fabric. So that would be on the Global Affairs website.
Another question from Sardar. Can I export to US and ship to Canada?
Yes.
What products exactly, Sardar? Is it the oil, right?
You can you can ship your products to Canada, and then from Canada you distribute in Canada and in the US, and you can do the other way around as well. But given the current, environment with tariffs and this and that, you're probably better off looking at Canada first. Because in Canada, the rules are stable; they don't change every day. In terms of duties and tariffs and this and that and restrictions. And from Canada, it's very easy to reach the US market as well as the Mexican market. Of course, it all depends also on the type of product. If transport costs are a small part of your overall cost, or do you have a very low value product where transportation becomes a big part of the total cost? So that would be that's how you would weigh in the advantages and the disadvantages. But it can be done, yes.
Okay. Another question from Diego. He's asking, what is the most important market for superfood in Canada? And what are the Canadian needs regarding FTA?
Okay, superfoods, again, that will be part of the CFIA.
Yeah.
And the most important areas, well, it's probably the most densely populated areas, which is, Toronto, Greater Toronto, Ontario, Quebec, and British Columbia, Vancouver, and then Alberta with Calgary and Edmonton.
I don't know if we have more questions. So the other questions there are more related to TFO Canada support.
Okay.
And basically
So
for this, it would be like they can just contact us and we can
Right.
assist them regarding on that.
Yes, that's it. So yes, obviously, as Fatima said, yes, TFO is here to help you, as you know, and don't hesitate to reach out to TFO and see how we can assist precisely in your case. So that's our mission at TFO. So today was a presentation to make you aware of other specific items with respects to market entry in Canada, but TFO is always there for you to assist.
Okay. Just to let you know, for the poll, we had 50% response.
We reached 50%. Okay.
Yeah.
Congratulations, Fatima. That's great. All right.
Thank you, everyone. Yeah.
Yes, thank you for participating. It's important to us, and it helps us be.
Yeah, for
It
sure.
helps us. It helps us help you.
So I don't know if we have more questions. Let me see. I see some hand raised. So I see Anne Sarfo and Virginia Losing.
Yeah, hello.
Hello, Anne.
Good morning, and thank you so much for the presentation. Thank you to TFO for your support. I have been a beneficiary of TFO's community service initiative with Concordia University and other trade shows, IFA and the rest. My question really is there any other way you can export to Canada if you're having a challenge getting an importer in Canada and the product you produce does not qualify you to register as a non-resident importer? Is there any other way that one can import to Canada without having
No.
challenges in these areas?
Not really. I mean, if you're going to do any commercial importing, you either have to go through an importer who is going to have an importer number, who is going to be registered with CARM, or if for some reason you don't want to or don't find the right partner to be your importer or distributor in Canada, it's possible for you to do it yourself to become a non-resident importer. Then you'd be able to sell directly to end users. But then, yeah, it's a bit demanding. You still need to register for CARM, for example. So it is more demanding to be a non-resident importer. But that's, as far as I know, that's the only two options. Either you partner with an importer, a Canadian importer distributor, or in an extreme situations, you do it yourself and become a non-resident importer. That's, as far as I know, the only two options.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So regarding the non-resident importer, they have certain products that what you need to produce to qualify for that, and my product categories are not under the non-resident importer categories.
Oops, you already did this research, huh?
Yeah.
Okay. What type of products are they?
Dried fruits and nuts, cashew nuts, peanut butter, chocolate spread,
Okay,
other
I
food
see.
products. But those ones are mainly meat, meat products for the non-resident importer.
Yeah, because for food, I mean, the regulations for food are more strict because, for health issues. And so, yeah, so it could be that, yeah, for food, it's a bit more restricted, shall we say. Yeah. So if you don't find the right partner, distributor, importer, then it's going to be a bit difficult. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you
But
very
hopefully
much.
you will. Hopefully you will. And,
Yeah. Yeah.
there's lots of SMEs, and there's lots of Canadian SMEs who are doing, who import fine foods from overseas, gourmet foods. There's more and more interest for natural products, and the question is how to connect with them is not always easy. But sometimes, visiting trade shows is a good way. And where are you based?
In Ghana, and I've
Yeah.
been to Seattle.
Okay.
Last 2 years I was in Montreal, and this year I'll be there in
Okay.
Montreal. Yeah.
Okay. In Montreal, there's also an expo called Expo Manger Santé, which
Okay.
is more, it's like open to the public. And so it's different. It's a public trade show where, you have ordinary consumers, which is different from the CIAL. The CIAL is commercial, right? So you may want to look at some of these trade shows that are designed for the public, food shows for the public. That might give you better exposure and help you connect with a potential distributor for your
Okay.
products.
All right. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Virginia. Virginia, I think you had a question.
Yes, thank you
Yes,
for the
please.
opportunity. Yes, you skipped my question. That's why I had to raise my hand. Thank you for this impactful webinar. So my question on the chat that was overlooked was, please, what is the authentic website address for TFO Canada? I mentioned there that the one I saw on the internet, I tried to access it. I was told it was not accessible. So please, is it possible to get the authentic website address? Thank you.
Absolutely. Maybe we can put it in the chat, Fatima, right?
Yeah, done. Okay. So
It's tfocanada.ca.
yeah, tfocanada.ca. I put it on the chat box as well.
Okay, super. Thank you, Fatima. So you
So
see, you have it, Virginia. So hope you can reach us now.
yeah. Okay,
Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome, Virginia,
pleasure.
of course. Okay, so if we don't have any further questions, I'm gonna just say thank you to everyone. Thank you, Kristen. I think we've got a lot of content today to throw and a lot of valuable information. Thank you everyone for your participation and for joining us today to this webinar today. I just want to remind everyone the recording will be available in the next 24 hours in our website, on our YouTube channel. And please do not hesitate to reach out and contact with us. I also shared my contact information on the chat box. And enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatima. Thank you, everyone, for your attention, and all the best. Bonne chance. Suerte.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.